Hi, this is Kyle Higgins, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
You've just jumped inside the pull bag. Join TFG1Mike and the rest of the comic reading crew here at the GCRN as they make their great escape into comics. From DC, Marvel, IDW, Boom Studios, Zenescope, and more, we have everything you want to read right here. Transformers comics? Yeah, we cover that. He-Man? Yeah, sure. DC superheroes like Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, and Batman Beyond? Yep, we have those too. How about TMNT from IDW and I Hate Fairyland from Image Comics? Yeah, we have all that here. Plus, so much more. It's all inside the pull bag here on the Geekcast Radio Network. So without any further ado, it's time to talk about the comics we are reading right now here inside the pull bag.
Hello and welcome to the Pull Bag. This is episode 312. That's right, 312 for you Chicago people like me, because I now live in the Chicago area. So, I'm of course TFG1Mike. Joining me for the second week in a row is Dane Lamont from Punisher Body Count. Hello, sir.
Hey there, Mike.
And it was 4 years ago, this coming November, that we reviewed Image Comics' series C.O.W.L, Volume 1, Principles of Power, written by Kyle Higgins and Alec Siegel. I didn't say Alec, not Alex. Huge difference in those two names. With art by Reis or Reis. I forget how his last name is pronounced, and I'm sure somebody will say something about it. But yeah, I specifically, when I was like, ooh, I've got Dane for the Flash Season 0. That means I can basically make him come back to read something that's actually good the next week. And ever since I've had that thought, I'm like, ooh, the main Chicago downtown area code is 312. Everyone knows that. If you just watch an episode of Jerry Springer, 312, 321, whatever the rest of the Jerry Springer number was. But yeah, we're here finally to talk about C.O.W.L Volume 2. For the greater good is the title of the trade here. I almost had to go back and read the first volume because I forgot what the hell happened in this story.
Yeah, I'd like to give major props to Comic Vine, the Wikipedia, for a bunch of comics that, large and small, to remind me whose people's names were and what they did.
Yeah, I always knew it was Kyle and Alec on the writing and Rod on the art, because these three creators have worked on various things together. They just finished last year, I think it is, Hadrian's Wall. If you want to see more stuff from them, check out Hadrian's Wall. It's basically a murder mystery in space.
Really?
It's very cool. Actually, we just reviewed it. When did we do that? 305? Yeah. We just reviewed that this past April, the trade. And if you need access to that, we can talk about that later. But anyway, C.O.W.L season Volume 2, The Greater Good. This is issue 7 to 11 of the series. I was very, not necessarily disappointed with the book, but disappointed that it ended. Like, I wasn't expecting this to have 100 issues, but, 15, 20 might be nice. I get it. It's comics. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's politics this, politics that, whatever. But I was really hoping for more than just 11 issues overall.
Well, in the introduction, which I believe is Mark Andreyko, I think he's a friend of the creators behind this work. He made a pretty good point about how the story does end in a fairly, in a somewhat frustrating manner. There's definitely plot points open, ideas to be opened up, but he also says that it's kind of appropriate because that's life.
Right.
Like in life, you might get one over, you might have someone kick you in the shins, and some of those things just don't get resolved. There is actually a little bit of poetry to it, but I also see it almost like a TV series. Like these trades are seasons, or maybe trades 1 and 2 really were side A and side B of the same season.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, unhappy with how this has ended? No. I'm just disappointed that it ended. You know, it's kind of like everybody like, oh, Firefly only got one season. Oh my god, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? You know, because whatever. But, yeah, no, this is, yeah, you're right. Very, very seasonal. I remember 4 years ago when we did the first trade that I felt that, I think, I'd have to go back and listen to it, but I think I felt at the time issues 1 to 5 worked well as the story, and then the 6th issue, which was like the origin of the Gray Raven, Jeffrey Warner, the C.O.W.L chief here, I felt that that was almost out of place. So basically going from issue 5 to issue 7, or issue 5 to issue 7, it's a full-on complete story. And this one is dealing with the fact that C.O.W.L is on strike because they're not getting the deal that they want from the city of Chicago, essentially is what this is. Now, what were you thinking when you read this?
In general?
Yeah.
I really like how it didn't go off the rails into the 4 different genres it's tipping its feet into. Mm-hmm. And once again, the introduction brings this up. It's Watchmen meets Mad Men meets NYPD Blue and with a little bit of crime noir set in. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many of these things, and it could have been very easy to lean a little bit too hard into the unions and the government are assholes, or that superheroes are unbalanced, terrible people. But they never really seem to get into any of that. And I'm actually glad. I'm actually very glad that it didn't get into anything too exploitative, and it focused more on these people trying to keep something that's close to their identity and also close to their livelihood.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, like we said, we have the city of Chicago, the police, the mayor, and all that on one side, and you have the Gray Raven and C.O.W.L on the other side.
Do you know what C.O.W.L is at its core, Mike?
What's that?
C.O.W.L is any DC... Well, let's keep it with Marvel here for a sec, even though this came out through Image. C.O.W.L is what happens when superheroes want to have a team and they want to do a lot of good full time, but they don't have Tony Stark to bankroll everything. Because for real, that's what I thought. Because I thought, oh man, I wonder if any other superhero teams have problems with funding. And I realized, oh, Marvel always seems to make that a big fucking deal with the Avengers, but they never really seem to address it in any kind of real way. If Tony Stark's on the team, they just go, oh, fuck it. There are literally been times when Tony Stark didn't have a company and Tony Stark was still funding the Avengers. It's just become their get out of jail free card with that conundrum. Same deal with Justice League. You just assume Batman funds everything.
Well, obviously.
And in C.O.W.L, there is no magical rich man to save you. You need that government contract. Otherwise, you are doing something for free. And as we all learned from Dark Knight's Return, don't do something for free if you're good at it.
Exactly.
And some people, the reason I bring that up is that I think a lot of people can see the idea of C.O.W.L, Chicago superheroes unionizing and not saving people if the contract with the city is not renewed. They could see that as some kind of cynical, dickish, or even comical thing. But I actually think like this is a level of realism that's not as depressing as Watchmen, or it's not like the Marvel Ultimates where everything is just always depressing and ultra mean and gritty. This actually, to me, focused on an aspect that I think a lot of writers ignore in any kind of logistics of superheroes, without forgetting that these are human beings as well.
Exactly, yeah. And here's the thing about this, like, yeah, you say about Tony and Bruce and all that, and they can just foot the bill whether they have companies or not, because let's face it, Tony and Bruce at this point, or even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they're still in comics. Nothing really this between C.O.W.L, Iron Man, Batman, and Spider-Man, Iron Man, Batman, and Spider-Man, there's three things that never really change. Iron Man and Batman are always rich, and Uncle Ben is always dead, for the most part. Like, there's just no changing that. Those are comic staples, no matter what's going on in Tony's or Bruce's life. But the thing here is that in order for the superheroes to do what they want to do, or save people or whatever, they have to have a contract with the city. The other thing is, this is not modern era. This is, like, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I mean, this is, 1962 in this second volume. So this is Chicago in the 60s, when there was no... I mean, I'm sure there were a bunch of rich people around, but like you said, there's not going to be one that just pops up and says, "Sure, I'll pay for everything." Having it be a superhero comic and also being grounded in reality makes this series very special.
Yeah, but here's my question: do you get any kind of a Chicago flavor through Cal?
Oh,
because
yes.
I know you live around there, and I just don't. Besides the idea that that times are tough or things are tough in the Chicago city, this city will chew up and spit. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the tale for like any major city, really. Did this actually? Could you look at this even in 1950s, 1960s era that it's taking place in? Can you actually go, "Oh yeah, that's Chicago. I recognize." I don't know. The mannerisms or the settings or the street corners people are on?
The street corners and the settings, yes. The people, probably not. Because their characters created for this story, like just the original. But here's the cool thing about Kyle, because Kyle Higgins is, I believe he's originally from Chicago. So, I think Alec is too. I could be wrong about that. But here's the thing about this, is they have, is it in the beginning or is it at the end? At some point in this, and it was in the first one too, usually when they did the chapter openings, they would have the map of the city. And they would have various sections. They would have River North. They would have this. They would have that. They would have the West Side. They would have all this stuff that is very Chicago. There is even several different panels later in this trade that basically show you where the loop is. Yeah, it's the map is right at the beginning of the trade, and it lists all these areas of the city and basically, hey, come tour Chicago in 1962. So yes, I do see a lot of the city here, and I think that's the way it's supposed to be. Like I said, the character mannerisms, I don't know, maybe not. I would say between Jeffrey and Camden Stone, Jeffrey Warner and Camden Stone, oh yeah. They're basically two, Camden is, but both of them are basically two warring mob bosses, even though Jeffrey is the leader of the superhero labor union.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is very Chicago. They wouldn't have said it in Chicago if they didn't want to put the Chicago touch on it. I think I told you this last time. The damn comic even has a jazz score to it.
I checked that out when I got done with my trade paperback of it, and I checked it out on Amazon, and I would want to interview the creative team behind this comic simply to talk about that, because it's an original soundtrack to a third-party comic, and it's good.
It is
it's
so good.
Generally, it is movie track quality good. Like the actual song Chicago, the actual song called Investigation. I think there was another one with what was it? Warden's superhero name, the Silver. Goodness, I can't quite remember. Oh, the Gray Raven. The Gray Raven.
The Gray Raven.
They actually have one named after, and you can buy it on Amazon. I mean, Mike, you should sincerely link to it somewhere in the description.
It's funny you say that, because we released the first trade episode. We released C.O.W.L Volume 1 November 12th, 2014. On November 14th of the same year, I interviewed the composer of the score.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful, because I think it's always great. Oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I just always enjoy when comics try and add in some kind of, what's the best word for that? I don't know. Enhanced media around it. Like, do you remember when Marvel had those QR codes? What did they call that? Marvel Now or Marvel Next?
Yeah, Marvel Now had them at the time, yeah.
Yeah, but boy, you could actually see the extra content collapse by the 6th issue of that, because people just ran out of shit to talk about. But I love that idea. I love when people try and even do motion comics with comics, add music to comics, or they try tweening effects. I always think that's cool, just to see what could happen, the experimental effect. And I think did you listen to any of the music while reading it?
Oh yeah, I had it on repeat.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's not just a gimmick. It's actually very atmospheric for the post-noir atmosphere that is in C.O.W.L.
Absolutely, yeah. I did it the first time after we recorded, and I had the score because I had originally bought it on iTunes, and I've got it on Spotify now. When it came out, you know, I read it with the first volume after we did the recording. When I reread the first volume, I don't know, a few months after we did that 4 years ago, and I listened to it today when I was reading this, because I couldn't not do that. I mean, it's very, like you said, it's very rare when these things happen, but when they happen and it's good and it matches the feel of the comic book, you need to immerse yourself in that, and that is what is so cool. I love, so just kind of, I've got notes for each of the issues here. In issue 7, I love Doppler's mask. I thought that was a super cool design on his mask.
Could we actually talk about the best moments, or your favorite moments of it? Because you mentioning Doppler just reminded me of that. Yeah. For those, just as a quick summary, because Mike and I agreed we're not going to take this down page by page or any kind of weird annotation. Yeah. But we are going to try and take it down more in general areas of the comic, like how we've been talking about its music and its general setting. One of my favorite moments of this comic was Doppler, one of the new villains that's been hired to create an artificial. See, this is what I really like, because it really does get at a core of the private and public sector constantly at odds with one another, or there's even the synthesis of the two. Like with this superhero group being a contract with the city, this whole comic is basically Warden trying to essentially get a better bargaining chip, so his superhero team can have better vests and a nicer retirement. Like, all this horror happens over maybe 3 paragraphs of a contract. That's kind of what's darkly hilarious over Cal. But anyway, in part of creating more leverage for is this last name Warden, the guy that used to be great? Okay.
Warner. Jeffrey Warner. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Jeffrey Warner. He actually like Mike mentioned earlier, a local gang lord to basically recruit new supervillains to create a demand for C.O.W.L to come out of striking. Right. So one of these guys is Doppler, and he goes, I can manipulate sound waves. And this is the first time that actually was cool to me. That was the first. I mean, maybe in Batman Beyond, when they had that one guy that was deaf.
Shriek, yeah.
Yeah, Shriek. And like Shriek, he was good. Mostly because he was deaf, and even in the cartoon, they actually, the cartoon trolled so many kids, because at one point Batman just lost his ability to hear, and so all the kids started boosting up the volume, and then when the volume came back, kids had their eardrums blown out.
They won an Emmy for that episode.
That's some real pop-up video knowledge right there.
Oh yeah.
But essentially, Doppler made it interesting simply because, okay, well, fucking comics are a soundless medium, how do you make this work without just making you tell the artist to go, fuck it, bunch of squiggly lines, pretend you're just attacking someone with an Audacity file or what have you. So instead what he does is he uses, I mean, yes, he does amplify crinkle effects, and that can hurt people, or amplify the sounds around him, but sometimes, goddammit, he'll just grab a sound effect out of midair and just hit you with it. He literally gives Catherine the D, because he grabs the letter D from a guy saying, oh my God, and backhands her with that letter D, because he grabs it from some guy's speech bubble in an almost Deadpoolian moment, and just of like weird self-awareness, grabs it and hits her in the back of the head, and while he tries to get away from her. And the one thing I like about Cal is you think, oh, this is a dreary, depressing thing where they're almost ashamed of superheroics, and that's just the backdrop. No, every fight in this is very creative. Even the fights between two fairly regular dudes, like when Jeffrey is going up against Arclight and has to beat the shit out of him to make the story of John Pierce's murder more believable.
Yeah. And the fact that Pierce was one of the Chicago Six, like, they didn't even really ever touch on that until now, and just saying it in passing, basically covering up that fact. I thought that was super cool.
Okay, that was cool, but also a little weird, because Mike, what did that add up to in the end?
It didn't add up to much because the guy's dead at this point, but I was hoping, when I first read this, I was hoping, no, this is when I first read this, is when, before the series got quote-unquote canceled or put on hold or whatever, before the series went away, before we found out that there wasn't going to be any past issue 11 at this point, and maybe, like we've already said, they'll go back to it someday. What I was hoping was, even though John is dead at this point, that at some point down the line they would go and do another one-off issue like they did with Jeffrey. Like, I thought that's what they were going to do, like with, say, issue 12 or issue 13, it would be basically John's kind of history, like a memorandum of John Pierce and his life or something or other. Not necessarily a full-on origin story, but just the fact that he was one of the Chicago Six. So it didn't really do anything in the comic. It just basically solidifies the fact that Warner has to continually cover up everything. He basically has to cover his ass at every single turn.
Yeah, it's like, God, what's the name of like Ray Donovan, if you've ever watched that. It's just a story about a fixer in Hollywood, and he's constantly having to solve other people's screw-ups. Even though here, Jeffrey is creating a lot of his own screw-ups just by, I said, it's the victory at any cost at the negotiation table that is creating all of this. There's no real external threat.
Right.
Camden, the mob boss, didn't really give too much of a shit for this. If anything, and he straight up admits, yeah, I'll set some supervillains loose just because this has to blow up in your face sooner or later. Yeah. Let's do this. I mean, you'll pay me. I'll get some capital and some favors out of it. But I just want to see this blow up in your face. Mm-hmm. But what was your favorite moment out of this comic?
It has to be, like, favorite villain moment would probably be when he grabbed the D out of the oh my God. But as far as the comic itself, normally I don't like it when comics jump time or when they jump between two different plots. However, in issue 8, I love the juxtaposition of how the issue going back and forth between the discussion/interrogation of Arclight and the attack on Lawrence Hayes, the alderman. I thought that was a very nice way to tell the story at basically two stories at the same time, without feeling like you're being pulled in several different directions. Some comics nowadays, and even back when this was out, some comics in today's age don't handle multiple storylines in one issue very well. This does, and I absolutely love that.
Or doing what you're mentioning, like scene congruency, how one scene matters how one scene kind of has a thematic similarity to one another and how they can enhance the meaning of one another. That was really nice. I think that's why people like Watchmen so much, is that it had those layers. And while Cal doesn't try and get that technical or even up its own ass, it definitely makes its themes clear without beating you over the head with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the themes of the story, I mean, the themes of the story, the themes of the overall book, like, it's very easy. You know, you've got Evelyn who's trying to figure out the whole thing with C.O.W.L and Warner and John and all that. Come to find out that Evelyn was Pierce's contact and all that. I was shocked all to hell to find out that Sparrow was even alive, because I thought he died.
Well, that's it. It's one of those dun 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 moments.
Absolutely. This is just, people. If you want, like, I've been really burnt out on superheroes. Really, really burnt out on the big two companies. I barely read anything from Marvel right now, and the only thing from DC I'm currently reading is Batman Beyond, because I'm just a huge Batman Beyond fan. The rest of it, I've been so burnt out the last couple of years, and I've been looking for other things that are going to, pique my interest. This is one of them. If you want a creator-owned series that basically has, intrigue and, all that stuff, murders and whatever, and trying to figure out the politics of it all in the 60s in Chicago, this is the book for you, folks. I can't recommend this series enough.
Now, let's talk about and I completely agree with everything you're saying. It's, for a lot of people, I think especially in 2018, you can't just have a superhero comic that rests on its own laurels. It has to have something that makes it stick out from the pack. And I think C.O.W.L definitely does that. But what was a moment that you thought was the worst in this volume, or just the boring, or just did nothing for you?
I'm trying to think. A lot of the back and forth at times between Jeffrey and Arclight wasn't really boring. It wasn't bad. It wasn't poorly done, but it was just like, dude, even though Jeffrey has whatever ulterior motives, he's trying to help you. Just go with it. Stop, going back and forth and all that. What about you? Was there anything? Because, overall, I pretty much enjoyed all of this.
It's not really a moment, but a character.
Mm-hmm.
And I still like her. It just, Catherine, to me, the girl who played Arcadia and kept stepping out of the Union line to go after people, like she's the classic the superhero that would exist well in any other property, in any other company, because she wants to just do the right thing. Mm-hmm. But she has been sucked into not only the Union, but also being essentially the poster girl. I know we kind of talked about her being like the Sue Storm of in volume 1 of this issue of back all those 4 years back. But
the thing about Radia is Catherine Mitchell, I believe is the last name. The thing about her is, though, think about women at the time in the 60s.
Oh, no, I completely get it. They addressed that even in volume 1.
Yeah, absolutely, and they go even further in volume 2 with
no,
it.
My thing is how she reacts to a lot of this stuff. If anything, it actually makes her come off a little bit more childish. Like, I think even in volume 1, her and Grant tried to cover up their tracks a little bit more when they were going vigilante style. Here, she just goes after Doppler, bursting through the wall like the fucking Kool-Aid man. And then when she takes Doppler down and saves the alderman, the policeman going like, "Oh, your ankle's broken. You should stay right here." "No, man, I'm a superhero." And she just flies off. "I can fly, dog." And this feels like a 16 or 17-year-old that's running off some adrenaline more than an adult person. And and the thing is, she never seems to, like, here's what I really like about this. It's very easy for Jeffrey to come off as the villain in all of this, but I like that he has two things kind of going for him. For one, at the end of the day, yes, he's trying to make an argument for the Union still being important, for Cal still being important for Chicago. But market forces and crime says it's not important. But hey, you never know. There could be some mole man army below Chicago at any point. How do you know it ain't going to happen? Have that freaking insurance. Both him and Reggie make that argument at the end. Secondly, he makes it where, man, he never had kids and his time as a superhero is over. This is all he's got. And for a lot of people, this is all they got. And it's very tough to let that identity go. Now, is that completely excusable? No. But is it super relatable? Yes. And once again, Jeffrey is protecting people's jobs, their livelihoods. If you've put 10 years in this job and you plan to retire from it and that job just disappears, you're SOL for a good portion of your life, maybe all of it. Now, my point is Radia, or Catherine, doesn't seem to really relate or be sympathetic to any of that. And she never really seems to address any of it. She just starts going, Ree, I did the right thing. Ree, and just never really seems to have a real discussion with Jeffrey. Maybe because Jeffrey is too authoritarian with her, but still there's never any real debate over whether she did the right thing or not.
I understand what you're saying, but here's the thing. Throughout this entire series, not just this trade, but the first trade, they're based... The way I saw Catherine in this was that she was a woman who wanted to be where women should be, like out in, like, not just used to be the face of C.O.W.L, not just used all of the time. And that scene that you're mentioning of her, you know, breaking out like a teenager saying, "No, I can fly," that to me was more of, you know, no, I don't need no man to take care of me. I can fly. I'm fine. I will deal with it, whatever kind of a thing. It wasn't necessarily a teenagerish thing. It was more of, I don't want to say this, but I will anyway, more of like a woman's lib kind of thing. Because that's really what I felt with her character.
That's pretty reminiscent of the era, so I don't feel like that's a wrong thing to say.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that scene. And when I've seen her character throughout the series, is that she's basically fighting for her own rights to do, not necessarily do anything she wants to do, but at least be recognized the same as the rest of the men are, because she's the only woman in the entire division. So.
Well, I guess my point is, I felt like her arc went, and maybe this was the point, went against the major conflict with all the other characters, which was there's a system in place, and you can either feed into it or it will eat you. How do you react to that? Yeah. Like with Jeffrey, he's trying to get the system to bend to his will so he can protect his people. With Reggie, he is there to enforce that system. He is there to enforce party unity. Then you have people like Grant, who could maybe give less of a shit and just doesn't want you to push him the wrong way. Other people are down with it, down with the Union, and they are down with whatever they got to do, and they're just going to keep their heads down. And then we have like Catherine, like you said, who wants to be her own person, but her relationship to the Union isn't really made that clear, other than it's probably tenuous at best, and she's never really had strong feelings for it, and she probably doesn't like most of her coworkers. In that case, that's great, but they make it seem like she's more of a superwoman character with a very black and white morality, when really morality doesn't come into that big a play into this kind of comic. Now, I do agree that she is trying to find her own person and her own identity in this and trying to establish herself. And anytime Jeffrey comes down on her, she takes that almost as a challenge.
Yeah, she does. Which, yeah, I don't know. It's a very slippery slope.
Yeah. No, and here's my thing. I don't even hate Catherine as a character. I just felt like she didn't have as much to do with the main plot. In fact, she was, if you really boil it down, she is there to throw a monkey wrench into things more than to react to things. Yeah, I guess is my point. She becomes a problem for other people more than her actually being part of the plot.
Yeah, pretty much. and that's a little crazy because I wish she was more part of the plot. And I think if the series had continued, I swear I saw somewhere that Kyle and Alec said that there was going to be more focus on her, and she would have not necessarily a more central role, but again, it's comics, it's what it is, and it ended. I love how it ended though, because almost everybody pretty much got, like her and Carl are doing the private investigation thing. Jeffrey and Reggie are doing the C.O.W.L thing, and it was wrapped up very nicely. It wasn't necessarily wrapped up with a little blue bow or anything. They left, like you said earlier, they left enough of an unanswered thing where if they want to come back to it at some point, they can and tell more stories. But they also wrapped it up fairly well.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the plot, or at least the external conflict, was the contract negotiations, and Jeffrey got his contract. He got practically everything he wanted, and all it cost was a couple of lives, man, and some infrastructure damage.
Well, yeah, that's not exactly a good thing, but
yeah, but I mean that's kind of the point. Is
yeah.
Even Reggie and Jeffrey at the end try and have that conversation about, like, well, I mean, and what's hilarious is by trying to create this demand there is a bit of almost Shakespearean irony at the end, because while they were trying to fake demand for C.O.W.L by hiring supervillains, Camden even admits that half the guys there weren't his. They were outsiders that just came in. Maybe they were inspired by the Chicago 6, and now they're trying to crack at it. Maybe they saw how much money was being made, so they're just being independent agents.
And again, that's
their own problem.
Exactly. And that's the openness, I think. That's the open-endedness of this story, whereas if Kyle, Alec, and Rod want to come back to it, that's where they come back. They, like, let's say, for example, I don't know, somehow Jeffrey is still alive in 1972, so you now have 70s Chicago. And let's say maybe some of the other heroes, or even if you set it, like right before the Vietnam War, that would be interesting to see how, not necessarily have it be a Vietnam War thing, but, have the Superhero Labor Union in Chicago, like 66 or 67, right as the war is starting, to see where they are at that point and how good or bad the city is.
As dark as this possible story could get, I would really like to see how the C.O.W.L universe would handle, like, the Chicago race riots at the time. Like, I feel like there's that is the interesting thing about C.O.W.L is they didn't really get into the history of the universe that much. Besides, a lot of these guys were in World War II. Even Reginald's gauntlet came from a Nazi scientist, and he stole it from the guy. I mean, they have that level to it.
Right.
But besides that, I forgot who was president during this time. Like, reading it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when there's a point in the comic, I forget which issue it is, but there's a point in the trade where the FBI goes to Jeffrey and says, you need to fix this stuff with you and the mayor. You need to get on this, or else, Mr. Hoover's going to come in, and once that happens, all hell's going to break loose. I'm like, why is the vacuum? Oh, right, J. Edgar.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right. Talk about a cleanup.
He's going to come in there in his big green dress and fuck you up.
C.O.W.L Volume 2, it's a very fun, nostalgic kind of read, like looking back on the city of Chicago back in the 60s. I don't think there might be. I wish there was an omnibus of this, basically getting all 11 issues together.
I doubt there'd be an omnibus because, I've never heard of an omnibus that's 11 issues. I'm sure it could exist. And secondly, I feel like they are leaving the door open for C.O.W.L to come back for a Volume 3. I think these guys, did we talk about in the in Volume 1 how this was based off a short film called The League that the guys okay, great, because I feel like these guys want to do more with this, but maybe make this more of a proof of concept for TV. I feel like these guys just so badly want this to be a TV show, and they made it a comic to fill in the time, but until they get signed on to Netflix or whatever. And I do not mean that in a shitty way,
right?
Because the comic clearly took effort. The comic was clearly talented in its use of panel composition. I love the artwork in general. To me, it's almost like a Jim Steranko look with a much grittier tone, especially in the covers, which were always creative.
I love the covers for this series. They're so cool. Yeah, I agree. And if he hadn't have passed away, if they did eventually get a TV series for this, the only person I could see playing older, the current Jeffrey that we see in this.
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen. I know.
Okay, no, that's not where I was going with that. You don't want Frank Drebin in 60 Chicago. Adam West is the only person I could see playing the old Gray Raven.
I could see that simply because Adam West would probably be tired of playing a joke character or being a reference like, a hard-ass union boss? Absolutely. He would be so down for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Volume 2, what are you going to rate it 0 to 5, sir?
Well, let's see, man. I wish I remembered my original score for Volume 1, but it has been a minute on that. I'm gonna rate this a solid 4 out of 5. It's definitely above average, but you know what? I can kind of understand why they're stopping at it at 11. As well constructed as it is, there's just something to it that just isn't going to capture an audience in 2018. Or whenever. Like it just doesn't have whatever is going to catch the attention of comic fans today. Everything about it is very well meticulously plotted and crafted, and it has its own style, its own universe. But I probably won't read these again if I'm being honest about it. I don't feel like there's good replay value to these comics.
I think if you want to read the story, like if you go and if somebody goes and checks out the League on iTunes or wherever you can find the League, and then you want to see more of it and you want to read these stories, these issues, this whole arc here, I think somebody could do that. I do know that this had a fairly large fan base when it was, actively as an ongoing. And again, it's something for...
Well, is this large for... I'm not trying to be shitty when I say this. Is this large for Image standards?
Probably.
Like, wow, 10,000 people? Amazing. And I'm not trying to be mean.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that, not everyone can be the Punisher,
Oh, yeah, a solid 28,000 a month. Yeah. Just owning the world at those numbers.
Okay, fine. Not everyone can be a Batman or a Spider-Man or, I'm saying that there's a lot. See, because I'm so far out of the superhero genre or the anti-hero genre or whatever at this point, there's a lot of independent stuff. There's a lot of, even the licensed stuff, there's a lot of other fandoms out there than just your normal superhero comic. And this basically to me is a more violent superhero comic. Like you said earlier, it's kind of like Watchmen, it's kind of like other things, but it also, for me, it has its own flair to it that separates itself from that other stuff.
And not only that, you actually do bring up a good point in the flourishing of independent comics, and I'm actually kind of glad that the Comic-Con numbers or the Diamond distribution numbers, the dick waving contest means a little bit less these days. Mostly because if you have, like, even for us as podcasters, if you have 1,000 people willing to give you $1 a month or whatever, like you could probably create something out of that. If you have, if out of all your listeners, 10% of them are hardcore and they'll follow you into whatever you do, and you have enough of that following, you can make a living. C.O.W.L, I feel, could have 3,000 people that would buy the comics, buy the soundtrack, buy the T-shirts, buy the 1,000 limited print busts of Arcadia or what have you. Mm-hmm. And C.O.W.L could survive in today's times through Kickstarter and onward, as long as they have that hardcore group of fans. Look, it's kind of like how I told Jake, they should make a Boba Fett movie, but make the tickets cost $30, because that way the hardcore fans for Boba Fett will make up for all the people who don't give a shit about Boba Fett.
Okay, I'll say this again. Originally, I never gave a shit about Boba Fett. The reason why,
it's cool as hell.
He's in the movie for like 2 seconds.
Oh, God,
and then the Sarlacc eats him or whatever it is.
I feel like I'm arguing with Jake here.
No.
It's all about rule of cool, motherfucker. That's what everything is.
No.
What? Darth Vader is a man in a weird bullshit samurai scuba gear outfit who waves a laser sword at some dopey blonde kid. You can reduce everything in Star Wars until it becomes dumb.
Yes. Here's the thing, though. I finally understood at a later date why people enjoyed Boba Fett, and it had really nothing to do with the limited time he was in the films.
It's what he represented.
Okay, that too, but it also, like, there were 2 Star Wars Blood Ties, Volume 1 and Volume 2. It was basically the story of the Fetts. So, like, for me, as a kid growing up, it's like, Boba Fett, he's just a bounty hunter in the movie. No one cares. And then, 30-some-odd years later, oh my God, Boba Fett is amazing. I'm like, amazing? He didn't do shit. In the movie, he did not do anything, really, other than capture Han Solo. That's all he could do. Like, really? Seriously? That's it? But after reading those 2 trades and recording the show on those, I'm like, oh, I kind of get it now. I kind of understand it. Am I a fan of the guy now? Hell no. But I understand it at least now, why people are a fan of him.
Yeah, this is like saying you're not allowed to like Bippo in Superman because he only shows up once a year. Like, it's like, no, Bippo's great. He's Superman's version of Popeye, if Popeye was a super fan of Superman. Bippo is wonderful. You don't need Bippo 24/7. Just same deal with Boba Fett. You don't need him all the time.
Yeah. And the thing with Bippo is the only person that could ever voice that character is Brad Garrett.
Oh my God, I forgot Brad Garrett voiced him.
Yep.
Good for you, Brad. You get that money.
Well, it was in Superman the Animated Series because it's is it the episode Monkey Fun, I think? I forget. Basically, the only reason why I remember is Brad Garrett is because it's Brad Garrett and he's mumbling Superman and this and ooh soda pop or whatever he says. I don't know. But anyway, all right, folks, that's gonna do it for us this time around. Next time around in episode 313, Steve Megatron is gonna make a return to the pull bag, and we're gonna talk about something that I never thought would happen. I'm sure it would have happened eventually, but something I didn't even know about. I wasn't even keeping up on. Kyle Higgins returned to Nightwing again. So he got to write Nightwing in the New 52 from 2011 to 2014, and those stories are amazing. And then obviously the New 52 became Rebirth, and he went on to other things and whatever else. Well, I come to find out, last year into this year, he did a 6-issue miniseries, Nightwing: The New Order. And
that was a very good series.
Oh my God, it's glorious. It's just because the trade came out this year, not necessarily when the series debuted, but just because the trade paperback came out this year, it is easily right now, as of this recording, in my personal opinion, the best trade paperback of the year.
How and it really makes you wonder. A mini-series about Nightwing got released in the year 2018. That's pretty bananas.
Not really. He's got his own ongoing at DC still.
Barely. He is the Punisher of the DC universe, and by that I mean they could let his ass go and put him to sleep anytime. They
did that already.
Yeah. No, and not only that, like Dan Didio, or however you say his last name.
Dan Didio. Yeah.
He has constantly been saying Nightwing is a pointless character and should die, and that's why Nightwing has had to become a super spy, move back to Bloodhaven, date a blue-haired chick for a while, make friends with a shark dude, just anything that sticks. Maybe have a what-if future story, a miniseries done by a fan-favorite writer. He is always on the razor's edge of getting canceled, and don't you Nightwing fans ever forget that. And this is coming from a guy that likes Nightwing. But boy, he's never as popular as you Nightwing fans seem to think he is.
Mm-hmm. He's essentially Batman's first son, Damian be damned. I don't care about the biology of it all, but, there was that one time that the Punisher went to Chicago and Nightwing ran him over with a train, so there's always that. So,
cool.
Nightwing beats the Punisher.
Cool.
Yes. Where can the people find you online, sir?
Well, we are on PunisherBodyCount.com and also on all major RSS feed and podcast providers, including Stitcher, I believe. Let's see here. Also, I have a prank phone call album called the Paul Perone Tapes that you can buy off Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, and that other service for rappers that I forget. And you can... Let's see here. Yeah, that's called the Paul Perone Tapes. You can also, donate to our coffee.com page, which you just go to co-fi.com and buy Jake and I, my co-host is Jake, a cup of coffee. Every coffee brings us closer to our goal, which is a $1,000 bounty for the head of Garth Ennis. But you got to keep the head alive. We want to interview him first.
Awesome. I am at TFG1Mike on Twitter. You can follow at Geekcast Radio and at The Pullbag on Twitter as well. Make your great escape into comics, and we will catch you next time here inside The Pullbag.
Hi, this is Joe Clark, composer of the C.O.W.L Sessions, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
You've just heard the latest episode of The Pullbag, the GCRN's first comic review and discussion podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate and leave a review for the show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Become a fan of us on Facebook, facebook.com/thepullbag. Send us an email, feedback at geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at thepullbag and at geekcastradio. So until next time, make your great escape into comics and unleash the geek in you.